Okay, I promised it, guys, and here it is, another episode of the Q&A, which is all well and good because, man, I've got to get my priorities right. I had that last Q&A ready for ages, and then I just kept playing World vs. World and World vs. World because I'm so close to my defense against guards. But finally, that's up. So we're going to do our second one of the week. I hope you guys enjoy. As I say, there's just so many good questions, or I don't know, I feel very charged, like I have a lot to say lately. So, okay, this question comes from Tippertot, who says, in your recent Let's Plays, I've noticed you keep referring to yourself as us or we a lot. For example, you say, we're going to come over and kill this enemy and he'll give us what we need. Do you do that consciously? And have you always done this in Let's Plays? I don't know. I remember about a year ago, well, probably longer than a year ago, I remember when I started saying that. I do remember when I started saying that. And I guess it just started to come naturally because I want a Let's Play to feel inclusive. And also, I have most fun, and I've certainly heard that it's most fun when people like play along the game alongside me. I believe this began in the Guild Wars 1 Let's Play, and as we were going along, there you go, I ended up hearing that people were playing alongside me. It was such an expansive game, so easy to miss stuff, and it just came naturally. You've got to consider as well, in Guild Wars 1 as well, it was a big party-based system, so especially in Nightfall, I know, at least in concept, I wanted to really key into this idea that we were this solid group, and I really wanted to include the characters as much as possible. I did this thing where I wasn't playing with the henchmen and I'd only play with the heroes. This was something that was really important to me. So we were going around. That was me and Kos and Dunkoro and Maloney. We were hanging out. We were helping Cormier. And then you guys as the viewers too. So, and I guess I do a very kind of, my style with Let's Plays, I suppose, is quite informative now. It's very sort of guide-ish. Azuric, right? Nobody's going to be playing Azuric. Nobody watching my Azuric Let's Play is actually sat there alongside me. Maybe one person in the world is. But the whole style of the LP is that I'm doing a video guide, basically. I just feel like that has a lot more value. If I'm doing a co-commentary thing, I'm happy to do blind stuff. I really enjoy that with Matt. And obviously it's easy when I'm playing with Matt. We is me and Matt going through. But when I'm solo, I don't know, I prefer kind of the informative guide thing. But I don't know, I also feel like I'm a bit dry and monotone in a lot of stuff, so I want to like spice it up a little bit more. But yeah, I always say we, and it was something I consciously started doing, and I remember everything used to concern me when I started Let's Playing. Everything. I was so nervous when I first started. You watched that very first Guild Wars 1. It wasn't the very first video I ever put up on my channel, for the record, but that was the first video I ever put up where I recorded my voice, and you know, I can't even impersonate it. I'm like, it's some of you might know, but when you get nervous, you get very, I guess that it's a frog in your throat, right? You get, I don't know, a little bit croaky. And I was also really concerned when I first started that I was all high-pitched, and I was really concerned about doing voices like this. And I thought, I guess, I don't know, I was just coming out of my teens, so a lot of guys must have this, okay? Especially when you're really young, like when you're like 10, 11, 12, 13, and all your friends' voices are breaking. I don't think my voice broke particularly late, but after it broke, I still had this perspective of myself that I was a very squeaky voiced child, and that always used to concern me. I don't know, such stupid things used to concern me as a teenager. And I remember, anyway, that sort of carried at least a little bit when I started Let's Playing, that Guild Wars 1 Let's Play. I remember being really concerned to try and like moderate my voice so that it wouldn't get too high-pitched. And, you know, I talk very high-pitched now. Someone even made a comment on it recently. But I was like, okay, guys, so we're going to be playing a little bit of Guild Wars. Okay, I wasn't like that, but yeah, it was just so nerve-wracking. And I had, like, that long black screen where there was literally nothing going on. The whole thing was just, like, this big disclaimer of me basically being like, please, give this a chance. I'm trying all of this cool stuff. I'm trying out this challenge. And I'm still like this. I still put disclaimers needlessly, and yeah, I'm always so concerned about stuff, but it was way worse back then, absolutely way worse. And when I started saying we, I remember mulling it over in my head. I was like, does this sound weird? Does this sound weird? But whatever, you sort of fall into a rhythm, I guess, in the end, which often isn't a good thing. I don't really want to be in a rhythm. I want to, you know, keep changing stuff up, see how stuff goes. Anyway, that question is really not to do with Guild Wars 2. Sorry to open up on that one if I did open on this one, guys. The next question is from Joe Smo, who has a fantastic name, who says, do you think we'll ever get that Abaddon Fractal that we could have gotten if we'd voted for Ebon Nashblade? I don't know. Somebody told me in the comments that they were going to do that anyway. The one thing I'm particularly remiss with in this community is checking dev trackers. When the trailer came out for the Fractal stuff, there was this huge thread that apparently every man and his dog was reading, where they were talking about how the trailer had been made last year, and it was to do with new technology for getting these kinds of cinematics going, and they just needed another release for the Fractals to finally push it out, and lots of really fascinating stuff. I just miss it because I kind of avoid the forums a lot. I've had a couple of very small good experiences in there, but overall I kind of avoid them, and that's a bit of a problem. So I can't verify whether what that person said is true. I don't want to see an Abaddon Fractal. I don't know. I would be very worried about seeing the Abaddon Fractal, especially after what we saw with the Thormanova reactor. So we shall see. We shall see indeed. I hope if they do end up doing it, they really give it a lot of time. I talked so long about all the cool stuff they can do with that. All of the little things you can pick at from Nightfall and Prophecies as well with the Crystal Death. It's just so beautiful in my mind, guys. If I was an artist, I would draw the greatest things ever about it. But yeah, so I don't know. But somebody said maybe they will anyway. And also, the other problem with that is it devalues what we saw with the Living Story, right? The whole, oh, you're making a choice, it devalues it. And on that topic, where's our next choice? Where's our next one? I mean, they can give us more minor choices too, but I'd like to start voting on more stuff. They said it was a big success. Not every single one has to be this grand celebratory, oh, vote on this or this. It just give us minor decisions about characters that are going to be moving in and out of the story and stuff. I don't know. Maybe they don't even have that many characters to draw from right now, so we'll see. Anyway, Matt Hedgel, sorry, I'm sure that's like a Swedish second name or something. I remember a Ranger Elementalist in Factions PvP going around with a flare build. It was horrid, but so funny? Question mark. This wasn't really a question, but this reminded me of that build. I was talking last video about the Mesmer in Guild Wars 1. One thing I would append to what I said there as well about CC, now that I've played a bit of World vs. World, I could probably say, okay, that an Elementalist in Guild Wars 2 with a staff, and, you know, like blasting staff trait equipped, is probably, and with the change to Earth Attunement last patch, is probably much more like a Mesmer than you will ever see a Mesmer be in Guild Wars 2. That's probably the most significantly controlling spec I have ever come across. Like those big static fields, incredible stuff, really cool. And the Earth things, they can just slam on Zergs. It's the equivalent in Guild Wars 2 of a Guild Wars 1 Mesmer build that was quite late. That was a Guild Wars 1 Mesmer build very late in the game where Shared Anguish, or Shared Burden I think it was, the elite one, this skill was made AoE and completely revamped, and basically meant you cast it on a group of mobs and it slowed them all down by like 33%, and it slowed all of their cooldowns down, and it slowed down all of their cast times in like a massive AoE. And Guild Wars 1 didn't have this, oh, only 5 targets are effective stuff. It was like, if you balled everyone up properly, you could do insane damage. Basically, hard mode, another awesome feature which we'll never see in Guild Wars 2, hard mode made all enemies move faster, activate skills faster, hit harder, and what was the other one I was talking about? Cast quicker. But if you were a Mesmer and you used this elite skill, you could basically swap hard mode back to normal mode in many respects. It was really cool. It was really cool. It's also a curious thing, that skill, to me, because I've been wondering this lately, how fun certain things are. Like, Guild Wars 1 had a lot of interesting builds, but they weren't visual in any way, and you knew you was impacting the battlefield, but it was really kind of hard to get a grip on what you were impacting. That skill I just talked about, like, you knew you were slowing all of these enemies down, but when there's so many of them, and you cast, like, you'd get maybe a minor indication that you've done some good, and you'd obviously be gratified when you saw your team steamrolls the enemies. But basically, it's a skill in the first game that was interesting, but you had no visual feedback for. And I was just wondering whether, you know, Guild Wars 2 is probably better in many regards, because anything you're doing in that game, in Guild Wars 2, even though there are much less kind of variants of builds, mostly it's just Zerks and DPS kind of stuff, but at least you can kind of very visually see how you're impacting the fight, and it's sort of more fun in that respect, because there are a lot of really potent builds in Guild Wars 1 that kind of weren't, that you could only appreciate on like an underlying level, because you couldn't see it so easily. I mean, if you were good at the game and you knew what to watch out for, you could see it, but whatever. Anyway, I've gone miles off of the question. This flare build, yeah, it was a funny build that people used to run in Guild Wars 1 PvP. Basically, I think if flare is the skill I'm thinking of, or maybe that was fireball. Flare was probably the one that was on like a 7-second cooldown. Basically, guys, it was just a really simple projectile-based attack, 7-second cooldown or something, and did a fair amount of damage. And you could be like an Elementalist / Mesmer multi-classing, and you could, or a Mesmer / Elementalist, And you could use, like, another thing I didn't talk about with Mesmer's skills last episode was skill manipulation. That was a huge thing of Guild Wars 1 Mesmer that I loved. Mesmers in the first game could steal abilities from their enemies and duplicate abilities on their bar and interrupt abilities and then take them for their own and remove hexes, and then you would be able to cast that hex back at someone. Mesmer in Guild Wars 2 has one skill like that, and that's Mimic, I believe. It's the only skill they get like that. It was a huge part of what it meant to be a Mesmer in Guild Wars 1. And this build, it was a 7-second cooldown skill, but as a Mesmer, you could duplicate it loads of times across your bar, and then you would just keep spamming it, spam flare like mad. And that was basically the idea of the build. I think that there was a stoning variant of that, which meant you'd throw one rock at someone, which would apply weakness to them. Then you'd throw another rock at them that meant if they had weakness on them, it would knock them down. And then you would throw the first rock again and weakness. And because you're a Mesmer, you could do this with fast casting, and you could do it really rapidly, and you'd just be throwing all of these rocks out. As you can see, for any Guild Wars 2 exclusive players that have listened to this answer, as you can see, there was a lot more sort of going on with the builds in that game. But that wasn't necessarily a positive, because there was so much opportunity for people to play terrible builds, and it was a very steep learning curve, frankly, it really was. Anyway, Tiaman Killick, next question says, hey WP, don't you think that the waypoints take away too much of the fun and challenge in the world of exploring Guild Wars 2? When I explored the world in Guild Wars 1, I got a satisfying feeling of achievement because the waypoints are mostly far and few, and between the enemies are harder. In Guild Wars 2, I don't. If ArenaNet removed most of the waypoints, I think the player base would be less spread out and would be more useful to group up with other people. Players who would usually play alone wouldn't be left out because at the waypoints, you generally find other people who want to group up and explore the world. They could even have a whole zone without waypoints. I think Ore gets the closest example in Guild Wars 2 of the system because of the scarcity of uncontested waypoints and the relatively dangerous enemies. Well, what you got to consider is, in Guild Wars 2, people are used to there being loads of waypoints, and they got used to it the entire way through the game. When they got to Ore, a lot of people really disliked it, especially like the CC on enemies, which was supposed to encourage you to fight them, just as you're saying here, because in principle that sounds fun on some level. But the community of Guild Wars 2 is used to this wonderful world where you can just blink around wherever the hell you want. And so I don't think it would be very easy for ArenaNet to do something like this. And the other thing you've got to consider about Guild Wars 1, I'm not saying I hate this idea, but the other thing you've got to consider about Guild Wars 1 is it had what I call over-aggro syndrome, and I believe that comes from some review I read of Guild Wars 1 like a long time ago. I don't even know why I was reading a review of it, but I read a review and people were talking about this, particularly like some factions areas. Guild Wars 1, yeah, it didn't have many waypoints, and yeah, there were lots of enemies that encouraged you to sort of do more stuff as you were exploring and wandering around the world, but it was horrible. It was horrible, let's be honest. You'd walk 2 seconds and there'd be some patrolling mob or stationary, and when I say mob, I mean group of enemies. There'd be some patrolling group of enemies, a stationary group of enemies, constantly that you would just have to fight through and fight through and fight through, and every time you'd be fighting one group and you'd be about to kill them, and then a second group would just wander in on the side and your heart would sink a little, and then you'd kill them, and then another group would wander in the side and your heart would sink a little bit more, and all you're thinking is, I just want to get to the unwaking waters, please let me go. This was something a lot of people didn't like about Guild Wars 1, and it was born from the fact that that was entirely a group kind of game, right? So it was meant to all be group content. So how do we enforce that people are always as groups? Well, we have to fill the maps up with loads of enemies that only a group could kill, right? And running became a thing and was one of the, in retrospect, I feel one of the most fun and unique aspects of Guild Wars 1. But the idea was it was all group content, and that was a significant change that happened with Guild Wars 2 that I'm incredibly happy about. This change to the idea of it's the general open world stuff is soloable. Yeah, you've got a couple of group events here and there, but you're meant to be able to walk around and solo it and enjoy it. All of that said, I would very much love a world with no waypoints. I would love it. I think it would be fascinating. I think there's so much of the environment art and the areas in Guild Wars 2 that people miss out on. I think that once you reach level cap and you've been playing for maybe a few months, the world feels incredibly small, when in fact it's still quite large. Like Guild Wars 2 at launch felt so expansive and big to me, and then of course you explore it and you learn the areas, but that initial exploration I feel could have been much more potent and exciting if there weren't constant waypoints. If the further I left Divinity's Reach, I didn't always feel instantly as close to Divinity's Reach as I always was. So yeah, it's nice, but I don't think it would ever really fit into this game again. Maybe when we get the Crystal Desert, who knows. Speaking of which, Sephril says, What do you think if they added in a few living story updates with one map at a time that contain a little story, like we're fighting through the maps to get to an Elder Dragon in a world versus world style that we have to hold thresholds and keep advantage, and slowly revealing the map? I think they would give a clear goal to the people like this. They would care much more for the living story than they do with the random and kind of aimless living story like it is now. Do you think they would do that? And if they would do it, it would be an expansion replacement for the people that are craving for one. I think it could be an expansion replacement. I've gone off on many rants recently about how much I want an expansion. I think there was a point with the living story back when the Zephyrite Sanctum came out, back then, and this would have been impossible because, you know, they have to make stuff 4 months in advance. But I think that when the Zephyrite Sanctum came out, they dropped these hints about the Crystal Desert, and then the next release took us through that gate by Ebonhawk, just to one small zone, you know, not even necessarily a very big one, maybe a zone slightly larger than the Zephyrite Sanctum zone itself was, just a small zone like that. And then every single 2 weeks, or every month, okay, what they could do is they reveal a little bit of the map, and then they do a second patch after 2 weeks that gives us a little bit more to do in that map, right? I think if from that point of the living story, they just kept pressing us deeper into the Crystal Desert, every month we're getting a little bit more of the map, we would be in an insane place right now. We really would. It would be incredibly exciting. Many of the comments I've seen about the Edge of the Mist stuff that I'm going to be putting up, and already have put up, is people saying, wow, I can't believe how exciting it is just to explore a new place. This tells me one thing: Guild Wars 2 needs more areas to explore. That's what everybody sees, and I couldn't agree more. Can you imagine where we'd be if we'd slowly been pressing further and further in the Crystal Desert, and we could have had a villain, maybe it was Scarlet, maybe it was someone else, but every time, you know, the idea was, not necessarily a big Battlefield style world versus world thing. You know, I don't even care if it's gimmicky reasons why we can't progress further into the zones just yet, but if we'd been progressing through it and there was a narrative and an arc as we were going, it was all lined up, and they didn't make this decision to do it all over the world for the living story, that it was just sort of this big press into the Crystal Desert, it would be insanely exciting to know that always a month away there was somewhere new to explore. And maybe that would grow tired, and maybe that would grow old. Maybe people wouldn't be very happy about the quality of the first 3 maps that were added, and now we're coming into December and they're not really looking forward to the 4th map that's going to be added because they expect it to be more of the same. Maybe it would be like that. But I think it would be worth a shot, and I feel personally I'd be far more excited about that. It's all easier said than done, though. I could also, with the same breath, say, yeah, they should have just given us the whole Crystal Desert in one living story patch, and then given us the Isles of Janthir in the next, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just not feasible, and it's very difficult to speculate on what is feasible for this company at the moment. It's a very different company to the one it was during Guild Wars 1's times. I think comparisons to how things were developed for that are no longer apt whatsoever, and it's just something very difficult to say. One thing I think we can say with this idea of adding new areas is ArenaNet are obviously wary of it. They don't want to spread the player base out too much. They don't want the entire game. You guys see what it's like with the living story updates. You see what it's like when that update comes out, everybody piles on, everywhere becomes a ghost town except that new area, and then they all flood away again. They don't want that. I think a couple more systems in the game to encourage healthy activity all around the world. I talked on Visual Wood about this idea of, as an event, basically in Guild Wars 2, if an enemy spawned and it hasn't been killed for a long time, you get bonus experience for killing it. I feel that should be applied to dynamic events in terms of the gold they give, the experience they give, and the karma they give. If a dynamic event hasn't been done for a really long time, its loot just keeps ramping up and up and up and up. And don't put a cap, okay, put a cap on it, but a really high one, so there's this insane incentive for people to go out there and explore the smaller and more remote regions of Tyria. Stuff like that. There are other systems that people have proposed that I also very much agree with. Just 1 or 2 things like this, you know, basic things that flood people out. The Champion Box update was fantastic. A lot of what they're doing with the world events is fantastic. Just a few more things to encourage that healthy activity around the entire game. Then I feel there should be no worries at all with doing something like your question suggests here, where we slowly unveil a new area of the world and we press further in, and it's cohesive and it's all centered there. And you know, they can, for their like pre-patch hint, they can drop stuff in. Like right now in Tyria, there's all these do not touch things all around the world. Had countless people asking me about them. I've got no idea what they are. You know, a lot of ArenaNet's little hints and stuff are hinting at completely new stuff that really doesn't have any meaning because there's so little you can speculate on them. If they were to do something like this Crystal Desert idea, where we're slowly pushing in, those little hints like the do not touch thing, would have more weight to them, because hopefully they would be seated in already spreading out storylines and stuff. You know, we can get more characters each new area we go to. I think it would be fantastic. And once they came out, yes, everyone would flood there for the first day, but then there would be far more profit, and frankly that's what MMO players want, profit. There'd be more profit in exploring the regular regions of Tyria. Why would you stay in this completely overpopulated new place once you've seen the new content, if there are much greater rewards to go explore the smaller areas of Skritzberg in Brisbane Wildlands? Then everybody spreads out again, and it doesn't feel like the game's dying. That is one really compelling idea to me that I think would be fantastic for the Living Story. And maybe we'll see them go with something like that one day. Or they're just doing like a big secret update that will just suddenly get thrown out there. Which might not be a good idea at all if you think about it, because everyone's just going to flood there and then leave. But we'll see. We shall see. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions whatsoever you'd like to ask me, leave them down in the comment section below. If you've got any comments on stupid shit I have said this episode, also feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I will catch you next time. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.